morning, everyone. This is Cynthia Motters from AmP&x. We have a very exciting guest today, Lisa Sonni. Did I say Sonni right, Lisa?
It's pronounced Sunny, but most people don't pronounce it properly. It's spelled funny, so.
Yeah, I like Sunny better because it just evokes sunshine.
Exactly.
Yeah, but for those who are new to AmP&x, we have various guests on the show, and our mission is to shine a light on abuse. We have our peace pendants that we sell, and we donate to Peace Over Violence, and that donation helps someone get out of an abusive relationship via transportation. We have various guests that come on here, and a lot of them talk about abuse that they've been in, what led them to the path they're on now, and red flags and takeaways and key learnings. And then we've had experts come on about how to manifest a healthier lifestyle, things to do to get out of it. And I think yours, Lisa, is really about how to rebuild, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And that, I love that because we haven't really kind of dove into that. We've had a lot of conversations about you're in it, how do you spot it? What do you do? How do you maybe get out of it? But then, like, once that's all kind of put to bed, hopefully for many, it's like, what do you do to get your life back on track? And just a little bit about your background. When I was looking at, you're a certified relationship coach, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And did you write a book? Did I read that?
I did. I wrote 4. I started with a journal, and I had been asked so often when I first started my online presence, let's say it wasn't quite a business yet. I kept getting asked how I left, how I broke free, because we can be honest, right? They don't make it easy for us to escape these relationships.
Right.
And, once I learned what a trauma bond was and how difficult those are to really break, I was asked, how did I do it? And that's what inspired me to write my first book, The Trauma Bond Recovery Journal. And that's a journal that takes you over 12 weeks, and it's 5 questions per week that sort of prompt you to self-reflect on what got you here and how to break free. And it's written for people who are in the relationship or already out, but are still feeling like they're trauma bonded.
So is it encouraging you to start your own journaling?
It encourages you to start journaling at all, but it gives you the prompts so that you have somewhere to start. Some people are great at just, a pen and paper, and they can just pour out their feelings.
Right.
And a lot of people have no idea where to start. So it's a good starting place for people who are looking to break their trauma bond. That led me to write my next one, which is on rebuilding after a trauma bond, which is all about the self-love aspect, because you really lose yourself in these relationships. We start to live for the abuser. So how do you live for yourself? Sometimes we had self-love before we got into these relationships. Often we didn't have any. So sometimes this can really be rebuilding from the ground up.
Yeah, I think too, as women, there's I just did a little thing about how, getting out of your comfort zone and some of the things I had to do that. And I think that we like self-doubt ourselves too much, and we don't have the confidence, but we really do have all the skills. We just need to believe in ourselves a little more. And I think part of that plays into this. Don't you agree?
I completely agree. I was shocked at how much mindset plays a role in rebuilding, because I'll be honest with you, I consider myself to be sort of rooted in science and logic, and things have to make sense. I'm a very process-oriented person. So rebuilding and self-love, it feels kind of fluffy to me.
Yeah, me too.
I couldn't really wrap my head around it.
Yeah.
And particularly around this whole mindset, power of positivity, it seemed kind of hokey to me. As I started my own journey through it and learning and just trying to listen to the experts and say, okay, they say if you shift your mindset, let's see how this goes. Man, was I surprised at how much, if you are able to take a terrible situation and reframe it, or a belief that you have about yourself, and really go back and question, where did that belief come from? Why do you think that you are inherently unworthy? Because we're not born that way.
Right.
So where did it come from? And starting to unpack that, and then unlearn the previous beliefs and relearn new beliefs is possible.
Yeah. Do you, are you comfortable sharing a little bit about your story and like what your aha moment was? Like that you've said, okay, enough and I'm getting out and now look at you.
Right. Yes. So I was in an abusive relationship for 10 years, and I didn't know that it was abusive. Certainly for the first 7, it was emotionally abusive. But in my view, he was just mean sometimes, really mean sometimes. But I had no connection to the word abuse.
Hmm.
To be fair, even when I first heard that word in relation to me, I was very resistant. I kind of like, no, 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 which I think had more to
You're
do with
like, no,
me
no,
not
not
wanting to,
me. I'm not in that.
not me. I
Yeah.
would never,
Yeah.
I would never be a victim of abuse. And there I was. But so 7 years, it was just emotional abuse. Of course, I'm air quoting just.
Hmm.
Um, and then it was strangulation. So we went
Yeah.
from emotional abuse to the one of the most extreme forms of domestic violence, physical abuse, in the blink of an eye. So one of my big things is preaching to people how much abuse is progressive, and we think, oh, he would never. Yeah, hold on.
I think that's a really important point. Like if, and I also talked about this about a week or so ago, where I said in my relationship, and this is me, I really don't allow curse words. Like I don't care how mad you're at me or I'm at you, like that is just not acceptable. And I think it leads you down a path that is just
Mhm.
so degrading and bad habits. So I think same with emotional abuse. If you allow it and you think, well, he's not hitting me, he's not pushing me, but it's almost like it could lead to that. I mean, you're degrading the relationship by allowing it, and it's also not acceptable.
I completely agree. I think, the rules of fair fighting are really important in a healthy relationship. And no relationship is perfect, and maybe you'll have disagreements, absolutely. But name calling, and these are the small things that we don't realize. And having been that person who rationalized bad days and his childhood trauma, and maybe his mom didn't love him enough, or his ex is crazy, or
Or the
insert
worst,
excuse
you
here.
saying I did it or I caused it. That's like the
Right.
worst, right?
Oh,
Oh,
right.
well,
When they
I probably
shift
shouldn't
it.
have left the dirty dishes in the sink. I could understand why that would have upset him.
Right. That's the blame that we take on, which also is an interesting path when you're escaping this abuse and rebuilding, to really look at why were you so easily convinced that
Mhm,
you were the problem. We
mhm,
like to be self-reflective, and that's important. I'm not suggesting we let that go, but
right.
our default seems to be, I see a pattern in victims and survivors, that the default is it's really reasonable to assume that you're the problem and that you're
Mhm.
used to placating people and pleasing others. So moving out of that is key. Um, when I was leaving my own relationship, it was, as most of these don't end with a clear line. There's always, it's over, but is it? You're talking about reconciliation, whatever. There was a moment where I received a phone call from the police letting me know that they asked me to stop harassing my partner's girlfriend,
Oh my
or
gosh.
my ex-partner's girlfriend. And I said, I just stumbled over my words. I didn't have an ex-partner. I had a current partner.
Yeah.
And the police
Oh,
were then used to communicate to me that he was with someone else.
oh
For
wow.
me, that was a pivotal moment, that it, like, of all of the back and forth and the lying and pretending she was a friend and all that, it just completely came to a head for me. And I realized this is it. If I stay in this longer, I'm just going to stay in the cycle. I'm never going to get out. There's going to be some kind of weird triangle. I don't want any part of this. Um, so it was my aha moment that I needed to stop and
Mhm,
learn whatever I needed to learn to
mhm.
just stop this and get out.
Yeah.
I was willing to just risk everything and figure it out, which,
Were you married or were you cohabitating together for those 10 years or?
yeah, we were cohabitating.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So the split was challenging. There was finances, all the things that make it really hard for people to leave these relationships. You're intertwined in all the ways.
Mhm.
And as I said, they don't make it easy to leave. So it's the question I get a lot is, why would they not let you go if they're with someone else? Why would they try to keep you?
Yeah. Yeah.
control. It's always, you know, the root, the center of it all is power and control.
So you kind of reflected on that. It was kind of like the boom came down with this other relationship, and then you got out of it. And then did you go through a process of like just healing yourself and rebuilding yourself, empowering
I
yourself?
did. I did. I started to read and learn, you know, I had just started on TikTok, not making videos at the time, but just started an account, and I was looking and watching other people, and I found a self-aware narcissist talking about his experience, and other creators who were survivors talking about their experience. And I realized, oh, people do this. They go online and they just tell the world.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where I started, was tell the world, which is where I got all the questions about how I did it, which led to the book, which led to a course that I wrote, and frankly, you know, an entire coaching practice. And now my primary focus in my coaching practice is both helping people exit the toxic and abusive relationships and rebuild and never let it happen again. Because statistically speaking, it's 80 something percent of women who are in an abusive relationship end up in another one because we're not doing the work. So that's a really key part that I
Yeah.
focus on, is that work. How do you learn to strengthen yourself, to know who you are, to have boundaries and consequences? Because boundaries are easy, consequences are what the hard part is. So how do you strengthen that all so that you don't repeat it and you can escape the relationship, but escape the cycle as well?
Right. I mean, I always think like, don't you want to like raise the bar? Like, okay, I went through that. The next, I want to have a happy life. Like, I don't want to have
Mm.
that. So, you know, I'm going to raise the bar, and this is the kind of person I want in my life. But yeah, it's interesting to me that a lot of people, not a lot, but some go back into the same cycle. And I don't know if that's inherently from how they grew up, or, you know, something that was wrong or awry there. But yeah, you just think like you wouldn't want that again.
Yeah, I think, you know, I think primarily all of us, right? We don't want it again. The issue with these abusive relationships is they feel so great in the beginning. And
Right.
it's so easy to fall for it because we want it to be true. And I think most people, and I speak for myself certainly, when I look back to the beginning of that relationship and I think, did I see the red flags? Because I used to say I didn't see them. Did I?
Yeah.
I did, but
Yeah.
I didn't know that they were red flags at the time.
Hmm.
So it's hard. We can't look back and not know what we know now. So
Yeah.
now I know what red flags are. I know what to look for. Back then I didn't. So to be fair to myself and to us as a collective, we don't really see the red flag. And I
Mhm.
also think, which is a much broader issue and slightly off topic, but we sort of systemically, we as women are
Mhm.
groomed to forgive and not be too demanding and too controlling and too
Yeah.
something. We're
Or
always
fix
having to
him.
shape shift,
Yeah.
and we're meant to fix and love him through it. We're
Yeah.
groomed to be this nurturing, caretaking, forgiving.
Hmm.
And because of that, even if we see the red flags, we're gaslit. Come
Hmm.
on, maybe he's just having a bad day just because he yelled at you once. I mean, everybody argues.
Right.
Meanwhile, like, no, I said he screamed at me
Yeah.
and it was my birthday. No one who witnessed that argument in my own life, and no one who heard about that argument was like, whoa, big red flag, you should leave. Everybody was in support of, hey, maybe he was having a bad day, maybe all
Oh,
the
wow,
excuses.
that's really interesting. So you had this argument in front of friends and family, and they
Mhm.
all discounted it too,
Yeah, because it
which
was just, you had to understand he was under stress and everybody had all these reasons. And to be fair, they all made sense. And it was
yeah.
just that one time. And other than that, it was great. And
Mhm.
even the next time that something happened, it was just another set of, well, maybe it's this. We're
Mhm.
just groomed to make the excuses. Plus, the abusers
Mhm.
groom us right off the bat with the excuses, right? They're very vulnerable. Covert ones, anyways, are very vulnerable in the beginning, and they're happy to tell you about how
Right.
awful their upbringing was, and then you immediately assign reasons to
Yes.
mistreatment rather than just, maybe that's the reason, maybe that is the reason, but
Mhm.
your reason does not justify that it happened and I'm still not going to put up with it. That's
Right.
where you want to land. And
Yeah.
that's what I teach my clients when
Mhm.
we're looking at that rebuilding aspect. The new you, after working with me, is such that you would not put up with being yelled at because of any reason. It's just not
Right.
how you're willing to be in a relationship. So you can have that boundary. You have to know you and really know what you're worth and what you deserve.
Yeah.
And we often don't unless we do that work.
And not make those excuses and really like have those boundaries of like yelling, of physical, of,
Certainly.
being
Cheating.
emotional abuse, and
Mhm.
knowing that there's no reason for it. Like it's zero tolerance almost,
Right.
not
It is.
almost, it is.
It's a
Yeah.
zero tolerance policy for those things. And everyone will have a different, list of their deal breakers, but you need to know what yours are.
Yeah.
And even, a mistake that I see a lot of survivors make too is when you are seeking a new relationship one day, if you're out of this one, you're avoiding what you think an abuser is, which is your ex. So
Mhm.
however he was to you, because they're all different.
Yeah.
I know they're a lot similar, but they're fundamentally different. We're trying to avoid that person, not realizing that they're all different. Some start with sweeping romance and some don't. Some mirror you and some don't. So
Mhm.
yours used to scream at you, so you're really against that. But what about the ones that are just gaslighting you and they don't ever scream at you? You'll miss the signs. So you need to have a full scope understanding of what abuse is and
Mhm.
what you are willing to put up with and not put up with.
So that's a key point too, like, and I'm sure you help people with that, is understanding what abuse is. Because if you don't really fully understand the whole, parameters of it, then you're gonna excuse certain things that are red flags. And if
Hmm.
you can't, like, be recognizing that, and then from that, recognizing it and then rebuilding, right? It's like,
Hmm.
first you gotta you really gotta dive in and understand all the parameters of it. And I think
Yes.
many of us don't, because like you said, we grow up kind of conditioned to nurture or excuse bad behavior. And it kind of takes an expert, probably like yourself, to say, no, this is not okay, you know, and everybody is different. But I think, when you know, the when
You
that
do.
when they yell or they do something, you feel it, that's a little different. That was not right. That didn't
Right. And
feel right.
that's that feeling that I encourage people to hold on to, that feeling that you have that it's like, I don't know, he's angry, but he's angry a lot. But even then we think, okay, so I love him and he's angry a lot. So we need anger management. We need therapy. And it's a and suddenly it's you and your abuser
Mhm.
against their abuse. Meanwhile, your abuser is making a choice, a conscious, aware choice to behave this way, to not get help. And suddenly it's you and him against the world and you and him against the problem. He's the problem.
Right.
And it's why you can't make them go to therapy. You can't, put their back into a corner and I'm going to take the kids from you if you don't go to therapy, or I'm going to leave if you don't go to anger management. If they are not fully invested in their own growth and change, they won't. So
Mhm.
you focus on your growth and your change, even if you have no plans to leave,
Yeah.
because I think once you develop the boundaries and you start to really love yourself, you will end up leaving. But
Mm.
even for the women that just want to learn how to be stronger while they're there, it's much
Mhm.
harder. It's easier to learn when you're not there, but you will eventually leave because you will strengthen yourself to the point where you don't tolerate their behavior at all anymore. And it's a
Right.
great feeling.
Well, what is like in talking about strengthening yourself? I mean, I think journaling certainly, like maybe trying to be more conscious and writing things down that happen, might give you a better reflection of it and not like pass it by, but like, wow, I wrote about this day that we had this argument and what happened. Like, what are
Yeah.
some
And
of the
I find
strengths to,
the journaling is a good start. And to be fair, some people hate journaling. And
yeah.
I think that what's important is finding something that works for you, not
Mhm.
because you Google like 5 ways to process your trauma, and journaling, meditation, you see a lot of the same things. If it doesn't work for you, not good. I will point out though that as I said in the beginning, I really felt like some of this wasn't for me, but I
Mhm.
was so committed that everyone was saying the same thing. I'm like, there's got to be truth to this. And
Yeah.
there is. So it's not that you need to become a person that journals, but if you can journal through this process and then decide that you're done with it, that is ideal. Because when you write it down, you're writing down reality,
Yeah.
your reality, but reality. And then they can't gaslight you, and you start to remember, and you start to see patterns, and it brings it to light. A lot of this is happening in the dark, even, metaphorically, the darkness in our minds. We're not seeing it all clearly. Once it's kind of laid out and you're like, wait a minute, 3 times a week I'm getting screamed at, and
Yeah.
I feel like I'm being controlled, and I don't feel free, and I don't feel myself.
Mm-hmm.
You need to look for these things.
And listen to yourself like that. Yeah, this is not feeling right. It's not feeling comfortable. And I think some women are like, oh, but I love him. And oh, but we have this great life. Or we do, these times he's really good. But I think you have to really start to listen to that inner self going, no, this is not right. So if they journal, what are some other things that they can do to kind of strengthen their path to exiting, I would say, right? Because if that partner is not going to take ownership, almost like an alcoholic, and say, yeah, I'm an alcoholic and I need to do the work and I need to get fixed, not you, we. But if they're not willing to do that, does the person just start moving down the path of exiting and getting
That
strong?
is my recommendation, certainly. And I make it sound so easy, but it's a 3-step process. It's
Mhm.
big steps, but 3 steps. The first is learning about yourself. Sorry, the first step is learning about the abuse, what's happening, why it's happening, what are the names of things, even some of the pop culture terms, future faking, and
Oh,
you know, uh, betrayal blindness. And you want to learn what is happening in your relationship. Find out if you're in a trauma bond or not.
mhm.
Not everybody who stays in these relationships are in one, but it is common that that's what
Can
is
you just
happening.
give us a little definition of the trauma bonding?
Yes, a trauma bond is a unhealthy emotional attachment that exists in a relationship where there's abuse and evaluation mixed with positive intermittent reinforcement and kindness, which
Mhm.
essentially
Oh,
means they're good and they're bad, they're hot and they're cold, they're the knife, they're the band-aid, they're the pain, they're the comfort. They're your everything. So when they hurt you, you seek them as the comfort rather than escape.
ah,
Typically,
mm,
if you're in that cycle and how a trauma bond feels, which is easier to understand than the clinical definition, is like you love them and you hate them. And you know you need to leave, but you just can't because you feel too guilty, or like you're abandoning them, or you're too afraid of the future.
mhm,
Obviously, fear for physical safety could be part of it too, but
mhm.
you feel like you can't leave. And I see this so much with what you just said about we think we love them. And I try really hard not to discount anyone else's feelings or
Right,
decide how anyone else feels, but a trauma bond isn't love. And you do not love someone who hurts you repeatedly. You don't love them. You feel addicted. You think it's love
right.
because you need to probably process what love is to you and why abuse feels like love. I think we need to go back a little bit further into our childhood there and
Yeah,
dig
yeah,
into why does being screamed at feel like love to you? But more than anything, it's misplaced loyalty. And I think we love the version of the abuser that they presented at the beginning, but that's
right.
a false persona,
Mhm.
particularly when you're talking about a narcissist, but even an abuser. They present a version of themselves that is just so inauthentic at the beginning, and they do a lot of mirroring and love bombing. So you love that person, but they're
Mhm.
mirroring you. So you are actually falling in love with yourself,
And the
things that they're
qualities you
reflecting
like
back to
about
you.
yourself. Yeah,
Exactly. So it isn't love. We feel like it's love, but I think even in the like, I can't leave, I love him.
yeah,
Change the way you speak to yourself. That's another actionable step we can take is
yeah.
instead of saying, but I love him, say, I feel like I love him, but I'm trauma bonded, or I'm trauma bonded, but I'm learning how to break free.
Mhm.
Change the language because you can't keep repeating to yourself that you love him, that you're stuck, that you can't leave. I'm struggling to leave, but I'm going to learn how is a
Right.
better way to say that to yourself.
And I think, that's a really important thing. Change the language that you've been using because the old adage, if you keep doing the same thing and expect a different result, it's not going to happen.
Yeah,
So,
that's
so
crazy making.
yeah, so take note of that and maybe like you said, for some people journaling isn't comfortable, but try some new things, start talking to yourself differently, stop using some of those things. And I also think that that isn't love, but also he can't love you either. That isn't love on his part if that's how he's treating his partner.
Right. It's control. It's absolutely control. And you learn that in that first step where we all feel like we have a PhD in domestic violence and narcissism
Yeah.
because we're in just so invested in learning about them and what they're doing and why. So that's the first step. The second step is learn about you, go back into your childhood, learn about where this comes from, why things felt normal, learn about regulation skills, coping skills to kind of build up to be able to get through all of the difficulty. And then the final step is rebuilding. And you're building a future that does not include them. You're going to figure out your situation because some people are financially dependent, some are independent,
Right.
some have support systems, some don't, some have jobs, some don't. So you figure out where are your fears, where are your unknowns, where are your vulnerabilities in your life. We figure all of that out as we start to build and develop self-worth. So step 3 is a very big step. I mean, they all have a lot of mini steps underneath it, but I teach it in my trauma bond recovery course, and I teach it in my one-on-one coaching as well.
Yeah. In researching you, you talk about regaining that trust, that self-control, that confidence. Like it's kind of like the inherent building blocks of just a healthy person that can stand on their own 2 feet. And it's like sorry about that, getting those key components back in order, you know.
Exactly.
And, you know, it's okay to be by yourself, and it's okay to start, you know, a relationship, you know, get your friends around you, just do other things so that, you know, maybe because they're lonely, they want to stay, you know, all of that stuff. And look at yourself. And like you said, start talking to yourself differently.
Absolutely. It's a game changer. You know, it's the mindset. The way
Yeah.
that we speak to ourselves becomes our reality. And their voice, the abuser's voice, becomes our reality. So we need to shift that too, of like, no one's ever going to love me, or you feel weak. No, I'm strong. Or you could say, I feel weak, but I'm becoming strong. You know, you have to make affirmations that you connect with and that feel true. Otherwise, your brain processes it as a lie to yourself. So,
Right. And then the last thing I want to kind of talk about is you talked about cognitive dissonance,
yes.
which I didn't know that was the term that, but we know what it means.
Yeah, and I still remember the first time I heard that term. It actually took me a long time to understand it,
Yeah.
um, because it's a clinical term. I'm like, cognitive what? It felt big, but I'll summarize it quickly for the average person to
Yeah.
understand, because this is what made me understand it. Cognitive dissonance is the mental discomfort that stems from the confusion of, are they good or are they bad? We think like, he's not abusive, he's just angry. He's not abusive, he just, and we rationalize instead of, he's an abusive person who pretends to be kind. And like, which version is true? It's the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde sort of feeling of, who am I dealing with? Your brain cannot, no one's brain can hold 2 conflicting beliefs at the same time. So that creates a discomfort, and our subconscious brain just goes, well, I'll pick the easiest option. And the
Right.
easiest option is, he's troubled, or, you know, he just had a tough childhood, or he's got anger issues. They just,
Keep
we
excusing.
rationalize it. Yeah,
Yeah.
we excuse it. And that's also, it's coupled with even the idea that we feel cognitive dissonance towards ourselves, right? I'm not in an abusive relationship. I would never be. We don't see ourselves as the kind of person who would be in an abusive
Yeah, because
relationship. So
it
I must
kind of
not be in one.
feels like weakness in your
Exactly.
persona, right?
Yeah.
So
And
yeah,
it doesn't align with our own view of ourselves. So
yeah.
we tell ourselves something else subconsciously, and it leads us to stay, because
Mhm.
we're like paralyzed with the confusion. And if I can't figure out if he's abusive or not, then I can't leave yet.
Right.
Yes, you can, and you should. And that's where I come in.
Yeah, yeah, and I just think again, you know, life is so short, like, just, you know, you've gotta kick that to the curb and get a healthy life. Now, are you in a nice relationship now? Are you
I am. I
Yeah,
am.
great.
And it is the healthiest relationship I've been in my life. And I say that because I've done the work. So it's not just like I got rid of the abuser. I
Right.
got rid of the version of me that would ever be with an abuser. And full transparency, there's a bit of grief involved with changing yourself that much.
Mm-hmm.
You're grieving the old version of yourself to a degree that differs for everyone, but fundamentally, it has changed everything. And it allowed me to meet someone great and to be happy and have healthy disagreements and
Mm-hmm.
truly just be in love.
Yeah.
I remember just even a few days ago thinking, man, I cherish the person that I am with so much. And I've never felt this way before.
Oh, that's
But I think
awesome.
I have a little bit. I felt that way about my abuser, but I
Yeah.
recognized that that wasn't real.
Yeah.
And this is because it's different.
Yeah, and
So
you're probably getting that back from him because you have a healthy relationship and he's thinking, "She's so awesome. This is so
absolutely.
amazing."
Absolutely, madly in love. So,
Yeah,
I know we don't all aim to go meet someone else, but humans are hardwired for connection. So,
yeah,
I know that a lot of victims are like, never again. I don't ever want to date another man ever because they're just
yeah,
so angry. And I was there too. But if you choose to date again, if you choose to find love again, doing the work, breaking the trauma bond, rebuilding who you are allows you the opportunity to love yourself and to love others and have a great relationship.
yeah. I really hope that for people, and that's part of why I do this because, I mean, I'm lucky. I mean, I had some abuse in my family growing up, but I have a really fabulous marriage and life, and, I just want that for other people too because it's so really cool and it makes life
Hmm.
so much more fun, and you don't need to put up with this. So, but anyway,
Yeah.
before we wrap up, tell people where they can find you and how they can utilize your services. Where do they go to get that?
Absolutely. So I am known online as Stronger Than Before. So you can find me on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube under the handle Stronger Than Before. And my website is strongerthanbefore.ca. So you can check me out there. And I've got 4 books, two that I've mentioned, the Trauma Bond Recovery Journal, Rebuilding After a Trauma Bond, Surviving to Thriving, and a book called Narcissism Unmasked. And I've got my Trauma Bond Recovery course, which is a 12 module self-paced, affordable program that people can take that gives you the actionable
Mhm.
steps. And it's great for people who, in particular, for people who can't afford therapy or coaching, because it gives you the path. So
Yeah.
that's my main products and where you can find me.
Well, I hope anyone that is in a situation will find you, will find those tools because you need to start, somewhere. And,
Mhm.
they sound like very good books to get you on the right path. And I thank you today for joining us and a lot of great insight. And I wish you all the best in your future.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right. Take care, Lisa.
Bye.
Bye.